Ever since the birth of basketball, there has been one question argued for generations amongst basketball fans. Who is the GOAT? Quote unquote, greatest of all time. It's the never ending debate among today's NBA fans. But as of late, for the past 20 years, ever since 2003, the question has been not who's the GOAT, who's better, Michael Jordan or LeBron James. While arguments can be and have been made dozens of times made for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Kobe Bryant, Magic Johnson, and Bill Russell, and other NBA greats. The modern debate over who is the greatest since the NBA began has been boiled down to MJ and LeBron. Ever since his 6-0 championship run from 1990 to 1998, Michael Jordan has always been considered the greatest of all time by almost every fan, player, and analyst in the basketball world. At one point being so great, the most popular athlete in the entire world. However, ever since being drafted in 2003, LeBron James has had a remarkable ongoing career, making a case for himself to be considered the GOAT over Michael Jordan, according to other NBA fans and analysts. As of right now, in 2021, during this postseason, LeBron James is currently down 3-2 against the Phoenix Suns. And as of tomorrow, the series could be decided. But more or less, let's get back to it. So let's just go back in time. When was this particular argument born? When most people would ask. The possibility might have occurred some as early as 2007 when a 22-year-old LeBron James dragged a thoroughly overmatched Cleveland Cavaliers roster to the NBA Finals. For others, it might have been 2008, whose certain numbers, 30 points, 8 rebounds, and 7 assists over the course of a full season, that's a great average, by the way, for non-basketball watchers out there, proved to be too incredible to ignore for the GOAT argument. Then came 2009 and 2010, back-to-back MVP awards, very, very impressive, and that's when he started making a case for his legacy and his ranking in the GOAT conversation. An accumulation of other accomplishments far behind the dreams of most players' careers, let alone a guy who was just 25. That is amazing right there. Most people did not have the first 7 years into the NBA. Of course, it wasn't something anyone had taken seriously until he won a championship. That finally came in Miami in 2012, and again in 2013. And with that, the argument was undeniable, a tangible thing. 10 years later, 4 MVPs, 2 titles, and the feeling that he's nowhere close to finish. Whatever you thought of LeBron after this NBA decade, no one who understood the game thought he was in the conversation. An acronym so overused it barely merits a mention here. But for the record, yes, greatest of all time. Whether or not thought he was the GOAT was besides the point. It only mattered that was the case to be made. LeBron is without a doubt one of the greatest players of all time and deserves all the praise and recognition he receives throughout the years and in the future. He is for sure, without a doubt, a top 3, arguably a second greatest, with either Kobe behind him or above him, but I digress. If we were to compare however, he's still not the GOAT, in my opinion, and most other people's opinion. Compared to his career with Michael Jordan, I would still say MJ is still the greatest of all time. I consider MJ to be the GOAT over LeBron based on these categories. Individual accolades, which really measures a player's impact on a team and what accomplishments he has made throughout their career, and the competition they both faced in the postseason. And that's a very important measure of a NBA player's caliber. That's what separates stars from superstars. Like Steve Nash, for example. Nash was a star. He had one of the greatest runs ever, building up amazing assists along as John Stockton or Derrick Rose. However, they're stars, but they're not superstars. And that's what separates those two different breeds in the NBA. Even though LeBron has had a longer career and is still going strong, he has yet to have an MJ level career. MJ has always been a winner throughout his career, and that no one can ever match. Another aspect of his statistics is the only reason LeBron has MJ beat in finals appearances and All-Star appearances is because he has more seasons in the NBA than MJ. I wouldn't say that's a one-to-one reason, but it's definitely a strong reason why he was able to have so many accolades and awards, because it's only natural someone as good as LeBron, it's eventually going to pass MJ when he has more time than MJ. In the category of personal accomplishments and awards, MJ is simply better in almost every aspect. If you look at the graphic on the PowerPoint, the numbers don't lie. All-Star appearances and All-NBA teams and finals appearances are the only aspects where LeBron has MJ beat, and that's just naturally just from being on the same level for X number of years, which is still impressive, but when you take it extra time he had in account, you can't help but realize that he had somewhat of an advantage. However, in less time than LeBron, MJ has been on the all defensive player team 9 times. He has 6 rings, which is very impressive within just a 10-year span, and he has gotten MVP 5 times, and he's gotten Finals MVP 6 times and Defensive Player of the Year 1 time. And it's just simply ridiculous because LeBron is great and he has his own play style, but all-around player, MJ is just simply better on defense and offense. Even if LeBron has slightly better statistics in shooting threes, however, that wasn't an era where MJ was living in where people would shoot threes. It was more or less going into the paint. If you look at statistics, you'll see dots across the board where that's where most points were made, were within mid-range or within the paint. And just the fact that MJ has the same shooting percentage as LeBron in that kind of era, where threes weren't perpetuated by the likes of Steph Curry and Damian Lillard, it's very, very impressive and just goes far to show MJ's abilities. The 1980s and 1990s were a much tougher era. It was gritty, it was bloody, it was sweaty, and it was much, much more unfair, where in basketball, when there was a foul, instead of just getting called and go to the free throw line, the refs just simply let the players play. Defense was better and teams were better. It was very tough and gritty. The 1990s had the most teams that won 50 or 60 games in the NBA for history for a decade. That's a very high average compared to the other competition that LeBron faced, where most of the competition in the league, where he was mainly in the East, was very easy because there were a lot of bum teams during the time. But in the 1990s, it was very different. The average of talent was much, much higher. It was a way higher bar and much, much better team records for winning and losing. Despite that, despite facing such competition with most teams having 50 or 60 games over, which is very impressive already, Michael Jordan's Bulls defeated 7 60-plus win teams, a record for a dynasty team in a decade. That's just insane. Most teams don't even get that while they're in the finals or in the postseason in today's world. And they even beat 20 teams that had there were 20 teams had 50 to 59 wins. That is just simply ridiculous, and that's just very nitty and gritty. 27 of the 37 playoff opponents Jordan faced had over 50 wins, while 18 of LeBron's opponents out of the 37 had under 50 wins. That's a very big difference there in talent and how much and quote unquote winningness that LeBron faced. Imagine what Jordan's numbers would be if he faced LeBron's competition. It would be insane. It would be completely unfair. He would get so many more records. And despite the aggressive defensive talent that was around during the time, including Hakeem Olajuwon, Shaquille O'Neal, Moses Malone, Bobo Mutombo, he was able to defeat all of them in the finals, or the conference finals, or during the postseason, because MJ just couldn't be kept down. And on top of that, just these defensive players of the year that were fresh off of winning their awards, MJ beat in the playoffs several times. Sidney Moncrief, Alvin Robertson, Dennis Rodman, who was on the Bad Boy Pistons, who fought dirty and played. And he's considered one of the greatest defensive players who ever lived. And of course, Gary Payton. It's just simply ridiculous. And the best player on that list Rodman, he defeated 4 times in the postseason, excluding the one time they lost to them in the finals. But I was just fresh off of but MJ was very babyface back then, coming out of North Carolina. So that's a little unfair comparison, and the Bulls haven't really found their footing yet. So as we go down, we see all these MVP All-Stars, not just All-Stars, but Hall of Famer, generation-defining talent that MJ defeated all in the finals or in the playoffs. We got Charles Barkley, Clyde Drexler, Patrick Ewing, Magic Johnson, Dennis Rodman, Gary Payton, Shaquille O'Neal, who currently has 4 rings right now, is considered one of the greatest. He's considered in the top 10 greatest of all time. Reggie Miller, Alonzo Mourning, Dominique Williams, Isaiah Thomas, John Stockton, who helps produce so many points for the Utah Jazz, was completely unfair, and he was with one of the most deadly duos to ever see in the NBA with Moses Malone. So during the GOAT conversation, there are some moments that defines a player's career and the legacy they leave behind. Some can be for shorter seasons, some can be from longevity, or just from amazing moments. As example, the shot from the Miami Heat got against the Spurs to put it in overtime, and they eventually won the finals when LeBron was in Miami to Josh Allen. One of the greatest moments ever. Or another example that really made LeBron's argument, where I don't blame those people who were thinking he is the GOAT, was when he dragged one of the most sorry teams he's ever been on, sorry as meaning in bad, the Cleveland Cavaliers, only having Kevin Love and J.R. Smith were not that good, but he did have Kyrie on the team, but that was one of the other superstars that he had, and not anyone can do it by themselves. So here's one particular series that puts LeBron in the argument for it. Despite all his awards and other finals rings, the fans would mostly bring up, if you bumped in any LeBron fan at the bar, they would mostly say his one in 2016 versus 73-9 Golden State Warriors, who at the time actually still was one of the greatest finals teams the NBA has ever seen. That is not common to get 73-9. That's an amazing record. That was actually a record to be walking into the finals with. That's the equivalent of the Giants beating a perfect season Patriots in 2007 the Super Bowl. I could be wrong about that, but I digress. It was impressive to come back from that 1-3 deficit against the Warriors, who had some who call one of the most unfair super teams in the NBA's ever seen, with KD, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and just a pretty well deep bench, while LeBron had none of those weapons. And what to say, it's very impressive that he was able to come back from a 1-3 deficit and win the finals, which no other team has ever done. But however, despite of that series, that's a great win. It's very impressive. But just from winning a championship ring against a very impressive team in a game like football or baseball, not football, baseball, or basketball, it's impressive, but it doesn't make you the GOAT. Eli Manning was able to beat the Patriots twice with Tom Brady when he was in his MVP seasons. A perfect season Patriots, but you don't see anyone calling Eli Manning the greatest of all time with having a 500 touchdown to interception ratio. I apologize for bringing in football into this conversation, but I couldn't think of a better comparison to where you're having an amazing game, but it doesn't make you the GOAT. And simply just Michael Jordan just has other greater accomplishments, and LeBron has a further way to go. He needs to get MVP at least one more time to win one more ring. But based on his Phoenix Suns run, I doubt that's going to happen. And he's just not playing to his fullest ability because his age is just catching up with him. Well, thank you for very much for watching my presentation. I apologize for how long it went, but there was just a lot of data to go over and a lot of points to be made. Have a great day. Thank you very much. And just so you know, the name for the student is Grant Smith in Professor Spradley's class.